Good morning. I would like to thank the press for coming. This is a press meeting organized by the Joint Consultative Committee on the Construction Sector, Dominica Association of Professional Engineers, Builders and Contractors Association of Dominica, Dominica Society of Architects. Basically, there has been much talk in recent times about the award of the contract to Energy Management and Technical Services Limited of Barbados, worth $18.2 million approximately. In the past 4 years, there has been much discussion in the public about the procurement, about setting up a procurement legislation. The act, which is a 2012 act, deals with the procurement of government contracts. This morning, the various associations which fall under the Dominica Coalition of Services and Industry wish to put out a statement to deal with that issue, which is of great concern, not only to the construction industry, but to the entire procurement of services and contracts in this country. I wish to introduce Mr. Anthony Leblanc, who is the President of the Builders and Contractors Association and also is the Chairman of the Joint Consultative Committee on the Construction Sector. I thank you.
I wish to read now a letter addressed to the Honorable Prime Minister. 25th April 2016. Honorable Roosevelt Skerrit, Prime Minister and Minister of Finance, 5th floor, Financial Center, Kennedy Avenue, Roseau, Commonwealth of Dominica. Attention, Steve Farrell, Cabinet Secretary. Roseau River Works Contract. JCCC's concern and questions. Open letter. Starting from 15th April 2016, we have attempted to hold discussions with you with respect to the procurement event involving a contract signed on Wednesday, 14th April 2016 between the government of the Commonwealth of Dominica and NSG Management and Technical Services of Barbados, worth $18,182,447.45 for the implementation of certain works within the vicinity of the Roseau River. It was expected that the discussions would present to you our concerns and will help us understand the situation surrounding the procurement event referred to, and therefore obtain, as it may, the just causes that form the basis of engagement of the service provider to the exclusion of persons in the local construction sector. We therefore present to you some of our concerns and seek the clarity on these issues. 1. The timing and publicity of the procurement event and efficiency of procurement planning. The apparent highly secretive procurement proceeding and award leading to signing of a contract is of much concern given the prescriptions of the Public and Procurement and Contract Administration Act No. 11 of 2012. Clause 41(1) requires that, subject to this act, a procuring entity, A, shall advertise procurement opportunities, 1, in the Gazette and on the website of the government, and in any other electronic media in the prescribed manner and format. These are mandatory requirements. Can you please indicate to us the dates, times, and places for which the Ministry of Works or the Central Procurement Unit advertise a subject procurement event. We are also concerned about apparent inefficiencies in the procurement process and failures in the procurement planning of the government. These seriously hinder the government's ability to use construction as an economic stimulant in the very depressed local economy we are experiencing at the moment. Over 7 months ago, Tropical Storm Erika seriously damaged or further compromised some of the infrastructure abutting the Roseau River. Considering that a design for the new Roseau West Bridge and various improvements to roads and drainage in the city of Roseau existed since 2005 through the engagement of consultant Deso Suprin, and that there is a yearly cycle of hurricane and flooding risk, why is it that a US $2.1 million contract was signed on the 5th June 2005 to include the design of this bridge? And B, why is it that an open tender for the replacement of the bridge was not sought months ago, inclusive of allowance for alternative solutions to the 2005 design? Further, given the recognition by local and international technical experts that urgent attention needs to be paid to dredging waterways before the onset of the hurricane season, why have there not been requests for open tenders for river dredging and retaining wall works for major risk areas, including the Roseau River, months ago? 2. The qualification and experience of the service provider for the procurement event. We note that the technical qualifications of a consultant firm are largely governed by the individual skills and experience of members of its proposed team in design or other relevant areas. For a design and build service provider, as is the case with the subject procurement event, the additional skills and experience of the main contractor itself is usually very significant in the final qualifications for engagement, and usually requires that the main contractor can undertake, based on previous engagements and experience, up to 70% of the works by its own resources. Again, the norm is that experience specific to the work being contracted out is usually required. There are several contractors locally who have the requisite experience in the construction of retaining walls on island. In addition, all except one of the bridges on the Roseau River was constructed by local companies. All the bridges recently constructed on the airport road were constructed by a local company. 3 local contractors post-qualified a tender for Lot 2 of the European Union funded East Coast Road improvements, that is from Laplin to White River, currently being implemented, which includes 2 major bridges. We request that you make available public information on NSG Management and Technical Services Limited of Barbados, which point to their specific experience as contractors over the last 3 to 5 years, as is normally required in procurement of this nature, in the construction of bridges, retaining walls, that overwhelmingly surpasses that of our local contractors to the point of excluding them from the procurement process. Item 3, exclusion of local players from participating in the procurement event and hence the local economy. A recent article quotes the IMF as stressing the importance to the Dominican economy of engaging the private sector in the post-Erika recovery process. And I quote, "Improving growth prospects will depend on structural reforms to facilitate the contribution of the private sector and reaffirm the role of the private sector as the main driver." End of quote. We note several procurement events resulting in engagement of non-domestic entities wherein local participation was deliberately excluded. These include Bellevue Chopin housing project earmarked for displaced Petit Savan residents, port rehabilitation, transferring operations of the asphalt plant at Collioure to a foreign private sector entity, as well as at least 2 recent engagements with Energy Management and Technical Services Limited of Barbados. We note that procurement by external funding partners such as the World Bank, the Caribbean Development Bank, and the European Union, unlike our own government, encourage the participation of local entities. Given that, one of the purposes of the Act number 11 of 2012 under Clause 3D is, and I quote, to foster and encourage broad participation in the procurement proceeding by persons in Dominica, and B, that same Procurement Act number 11 of 2012 provides under Clause 100 for domestic preference in public procurement. How do you justify, especially in one of the worst economic downturns in our history, excluding rather than encouraging local contractors, engineers, architects, equipment owners, and truckers to participate successfully in public procurement proceedings by wholly engaging entities from non-OECS countries? Shouldn't you, as Prime Minister and Minister of Finance, especially in the face of the IMF report, be negotiating with external funding agencies and countries such as the Republic of China to allow more preferential local participation in public procurement works which falls under the generous funding? We note that several of our major external funded works are divided into lots to foster greater participation of local and smaller contractors. We note these benefits as in the cases of the CDB-funded Antrim Third Water Supply Project, the European Union-funded West Coast Water Supply Project, the European Union-funded East Coast Roads, the European Union-funded BAM Roads, the World Bank-funded Disaster Vulnerability Project, Road Improvement and Water Supply Works, to name a few. Why then was not this procurement event divided into 2 or 3 lots to, and I quote from the Procurement Act, to foster and encourage broad participation in the procurement proceedings by persons in Dominica? How is it that these external funding partners have more confidence in the local construction sector and provide more for their participation and growth than our own government led by you? Is that how leadership matters? Referring to the participation of local artists in the World Creole Music Festival, you stated, and I quote, our position from a policy standpoint, we need to ensure that our local artists are featured, and not in a token fashion, but in a serious fashion, end of quote. Why then do you treat the local private sector in construction differently? Why isn't it the government's policy to treat local contractors, engineers, and architects with the same respect that CDB, the World Bank, and the European Union afford them? 4. Treatment of local construction sector, the first responders after Tropical Storm Erika. The exclusion of all local contractors, engineers, architects, and builders from participating in this and other noted procurement event has dealt a death blow to nationalism and zeal for development of country. Following the onslaught of Tropical Storm Erika, the massive outpouring of local resources from the local construction private sector in the cleanup and temporary solutions ensure the rapid return to normalcy that we realize. This has been especially critical given government's inability to ensure that the Public Works Corporation is a viable and efficient entity willing, able, and available as its predecessor, the Public Works Department, was for decades. Not only has their contribution been largely unrecognized by our government, but many of these private sector construction operators are still mostly unpaid, even after it took 18 months for payments for similar services in the wake of 24th December 2014 floods. Isn't your government's current procurement practices of excluding local participation of engineers, architects, equipment owners, truckers, builders, and contractors ensuring financial collapse of the local construction sector and risking the delay in recovery of the country after another natural disaster? 5. The procurement events and sources of funding. Public procurement is eventually financed by taxpayers, whether through VAT, pay-as-you-earn, custom duty, etc., either locally or those of a benevolent donor. The maintaining of the lowest possible cost to the taxpayer is so very significant that the drafters of the Procurement Act address costs under Clause 3C and 3H as follows. Under C, to require competition in public procurement process, and under H, to ensure that the best value is obtained by the procurement dollar. We have tried, but have not been able to come up with the cost of 18.37 million for the works broadly described at the signing of the contract. Judging from recent bridge costs of similar spans, that is about 160 feet, and catering for 1,000 feet of retaining walls and drains, and 1,200 feet of dredging works along the river, we have had great difficulty in coming up with preliminary costs greater than 14 million, VAT included. EC. Given your pronouncement made in November 2015, I want to again, as I have done on every occasion I speak to the public, that we have to exercise restraint in our requests and demands from government. End of quote. And given also the sacrifices made by Dominicans since the passage of Tropical Storm Erica, including foregoing of salary increase demands by the Public Service Union, we believe that it is imperative that the government demonstrate prudent financial management, especially for areas of large capital expenditure, by ensuring that its procurement processes obtain the best value and result in minimum tax burden to the public. Why, therefore, didn't your Ministry of Finance, the Central Procurement Board, the Central Procurement Unit, follow the wisdom of the drafters of the Procurement Act in requiring the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Public Works to utilize open competitive procurement methods for such a large procurement event, as would be the case of EU, CDB, and World Bank funded projects? American taxpayer who has to pay back the interest rate on the loans as well as the capital. Information in the public domain identify the source of funds as the Citizen by Investment (CBI) program. Given that having to sell a country's citizenship for economic reasons is a tremendous sacrifice, it is all the more crucial that we minimize the number of new entrants to our citizenry by engaging in the most efficient of procurement practices. We therefore request that you declare, as Minister of Finance, if the initial source is indeed the CBI, or if there are temporary bridging financing provisions for this procurement event, and if then, A, the sources of funds and the interest rates of the funding, if it is loan funds, whether the procurement process involves design, finance, and build, and what are the interest rates and payment conditions, if any, and the other sources of finance which were considered. Item 6. possible contravention of the Procurement Act number 11 of 2012 by public officials. The subject procurement process and several previous to it may have contravened many provisions of the Public Procurement and Contract Administration Act number 11 of 2012, some of which we may have already alluded to. Many of these provisions under the Act are safeguards against the onset or perpetuation of corrupt practices in public procurement. It appears that some public officials may be engaging in procurement processes and undertaking government purchases which may not be in keeping with the provisions of the Act. If some of the processes being engaged by public officials in public procurement do contravene the provisions in the Act meant to provide these safeguards, then many doors may be opening to corrupt practices. We would like to draw your attention to the provision under Clause 94(2) of the Act, meant to safeguard taxpayers from less than prudent public officials. And I quote, "For greater certainty, any public official involved in transactions which are procured at unreasonably inflated prices shall, in addition to any sanctions prescribed in this Act or the regulations, be required to pay the procurement entity for the loss resulting from his actions." Are you, therefore, as Minister of Finance and Prime Minister, satisfied that the safeguards provided under the Act are utilized to preclude the onset or continuation, if any, of illicit practices by public officials which will have the effect of having taxpayers pay more for goods, works, and services than they ought to pay, especially in these tough economic conditions? Given all the foregoing, would you commission an independent investigation using transparent methods for engaging the Commission as to the possibility that the subject procurement event and others may have been transacted at unreasonably inflated prices? We await responses to our concerns in order to help us understand the just causes that form the basis of engagement of NSG Management and Technical Services Limited of Barbados for the implementation of certain works within the vicinity of the Rosa River at a cost to the Dominican public and taxpayers of EC 18,182,447.45. For and on behalf of the Dominican Association of Professional Engineers, the Dominican Society of Engineers, and the Builders and Contractors Association, I thank you.
Are they a consultant company? Would you, as a private sector person, give somebody 18.2 million to do untendered work for you? Wouldn't you give at least 3 people to cost your house for you, and you determine who builds your house? These are the questions we have to ask. Would you prefer to give somebody on the side of the work road rather than your brother? What message are we sending to our young professionals, our students? Are we less capable than foreigners? Is that the message that is being sent? Is the message of capacity building what we are hearing in Dominica? Is technical vocational at the standard it should be? Is the dissemination of sharing of knowledge when foreign companies like our friendly nations like China and Venezuela come in, sharing new technology, is this being shared? Is this how we should go? Are we telling our students that they can stay on the side of the road and don't work because you're not capable, you don't have a brain? Is that what Is that the message that is being sent? Are you as journalists satisfied with what is being done in the procurement industry?
Is that a matter for journalists?
It's a matter for the entire country. It's a matter for the population. Are you satisfied that your tax dollar is spent properly? Mr. Kalai,
that when the journalist brings it out, you don't have to do what you have to, because like you said, there are many ways to skin a cat. Options are open. There have been instances where you allow me to slip by. From what I'm gathering now, you will not allow this to slip by. I'm hoping that this press conference today is not going to be a talk show where by tomorrow morning nothing happens and then it dies a natural death. That is not for the press, that's for you to take care of, because you have matters, as you said, to you, avenues.
I am only one person. I will do all in my power to make sure that something is done.
Let me just follow it off and close it. There is the perception in the public that only the construction industry should be interested in public procurement. I've said it before. If you want to sell toilet paper to the government, that's public procurement. If you want to sell a car, that's public procurement. It is sometimes amazing that only the construction sector is talking about public procurement. I would challenge the DIC and a lot of the other organizations out there who say they're interested in their members to confirm or to deny whether we have an open, transparent public procurement system that allows the taxpayers' money to be spent the best way and to give opportunities to every Dominican individual or company to supply goods, services, and do works for the government. And that's the bottom line. Democracy cannot stop at the ballot box. All of us, as the Prime Minister said recently, is our Dominica to build. Then give us the opportunity to build it.
So we have one last question. You mentioned 5 companies, 5 or 6 companies that could possibly do that great job.
Yeah.
Does that include public works?
I would tend to think a well-managed public works can also do that. Public Works Corporation can do that. I would tend to think so. They have quite a few engineers in there who are capable. And it would be a shame if the government Public Works Corporation cannot do it. It means the government is not helping its own company. But it should be able to, whether in a joint venture or whether by itself. Yeah. Okay, I take it that you have no further questions. I promise to keep you here for 45 minutes, and we have gone 45 minutes. Thank you very much. I suppose we can come to your own media house if you invite us, but we have not one plan that we can disclose to you at this stage. Thank you.